Story this half an hour, tackling tax reform. President Trump will pitch the ambitious plan to revamp the tax code to the National Association of Manufacturers later today during a speech. This comes as lawmakers work to lay out the framework to balance the budget. Ways and Means Committee Chairman Kevin Brady weighed in on the process right here yesterday.
There's a reason we work with the president, the Senate, and House together on this. This is bold, it is transformational, but it's achievable, and it can move us toward a balanced budget because, look, we're proposing almost a 40% tax cut for every local business, no matter what your size or how you are structured. So we're proposing a simple and fair postcard-style system that really helps families keep more of what they earn.
And joining me right now is OMB Director Mick Mulvaney. Director, good to see you. Thanks so much for joining us.
Maria, good morning.
Let me ask you, as you embark on this difficult but really critical step of passing the budget, do you have the votes going into next week?
Well, there's nothing to vote on yet. Keep in mind how we're running this process. We're doing it, in my mind, as a former lawmaker myself, the right way. We've introduced the framework, this basic set of principles that the White House has worked on with leadership in the House and the Senate, with various folks in both of those chambers. But now it's going to start the ordinary course of business, regular order through the committee process. Folks will be able to debate topics, to offer amendments. They'll be voting on a bunch of different changes here and there. That's the way legislation is supposed to get made. So the answer is today, no, because there's nothing to vote on.
I'm just really trying to understand where you feel you are in terms of this $1.5 trillion in tax cuts and what you're hearing from both sides of the aisle. You've got to line up the votes for there going into next week, right?
Oh, yeah. No, I think the support for this is broad. It's in the right wings of the party, the center of the party, the more moderate folks. Secretary Mnuchin and Gary Cohn and other folks in the White House have been working on this since almost the day after the election. So just because you're seeing it now doesn't mean a lot of the groundwork hasn't been laid. I think the support is broad, it's deep. They're just not ready to vote on it yet because it's not finalized. All
right, so even as you hope to clear the hurdles on the overall budget, we've already seen some hurdles coming up in Congress as a result of the details laid out yesterday on this tax plan. Republican lawmakers from some high-tax states like New York and New Jersey are pushing back, voicing concern for this plan to repeal the individual deduction for state and local taxes. California, for example, could face a big financial hit. The latest numbers from the Tax Foundation show that the deduction allowed Californians to reduce their taxable income by $101 billion in 2014 alone. Secretary Mnuchin talked about this yesterday. Let's hear what he had to say, then I'm going to get your take on this, sir.
Well, I think we should get the federal government out of the business of subsidizing states. The federal government has no business subsidizing states from a tax standpoint. This should be fair and that we treat all the states the same way. So that's our objective. But again, we'll be working with Congress on that.
So what's the story here? Unless you win Democratic support here, right, you can't afford to lose more than 22 Republican votes in the House. How are you going to satisfy both sides of the aisle here over the fight on state and local deductions?
Well, here's what we'll have to convince them. And by the way, I think Secretary Mnuchin is absolutely right. We need to get the federal government out of subsidizing this. But here's the simple pitch. Maria, if you and I make the exact same amount of money, we live in the exact same value of house, we have the same kind of car, our kids go to the same kind of schools, shouldn't we pay the same federal income tax? The answer is yes. But the real world is no. If I live in a high-tax state, you live in a low-tax state, you actually pay more towards the federal government than I do, and that's just not fair. It's not right. So I understand the politics of it, but at the same time, I think the way to overcome politics is by really good policy, and getting rid of this subsidy to the high-tax state is really good policy.
Yeah, so you think you'll be able to just have some of these governors as well as congressmen look at the overall plan and say, okay, well, maybe this moves the needle on economic growth largely for the country, so we're going to put our concerns aside because their constituents are going to be angry that their taxes are actually going up. Governor Cuomo tweeted out last night, virtually everybody in New York is getting a tax increase because of this.
Yeah, well, first of all, he's wrong about that. Keep in mind, you cannot look at a tax package individual part by individual part. If you do, you'll never get tax reform, which is why we haven't had serious tax reform in this country in 30 years and why it's so hard to get tax reductions like we're trying to get today. You have to look at the entire package. So I think the governor of New York is absolutely wrong. If there's folks in the middle class in New York, and there are a lot of them, they're going to get a dramatic reduction. It's going to be easier for them to pay their taxes. They won't have to hire somebody, pay somebody to do their taxes. If they work for a small business, their taxes are going down. So, no, I think that's politics. It's unfortunate that the governor of New York took that position, especially this early on in the process. Keep in mind, we don't even know where the brackets kick in yet. So I think folks who come out and say that they know exactly what this plan is going to do to this individual family or that individual business is simply jumping to political conclusions and not going through the serious process of looking at how we make laws. So I'm looking forward to going through that process because I think at the end we end up with an excellent product.
There's also the process of understanding a potentially fourth bracket. Where are you on this? People are wondering. Yesterday you released 12, 25, and 35% in terms of tax rates, but the highest earners are going to see, what, 39%? Are you working right now on a fourth bracket?
Yeah, actually, a couple different answers to that. We released 4 brackets yesterday, more accurately. It was 0, 12, 25, and 35. That's in the framework. And I think what we've simply said is, look, this is what the White House supports. This is what the leadership and the various groups that we worked with over the last 8 months support. If Congress wants to do something else, that's fine. Let's talk about that. The framework is what it is. There's 4 rates. We like those 4 rates. We're happy to look at anything else that helps us cobble together enough votes on a really good tax reform package that can pass.
So is it fair to say if you can't get through the elimination of the deduction on state and local income, then you're going to definitely need a higher bracket because you're leaving $1.25 trillion on the table without that elimination of the deduction?
I don't look at it like that. I look at the state and local deduction really as good policy. Keep in mind, what are the priorities for the president? The president wants the taxes to be lower. They are. He wants it to be simple. They are. And he wants it to be fair. Those are the 3 things that have driven us during this discussion. And that fairness really does play into that state and local. How do you look at folks at low-tax states like Nebraska and say, oh, by the way, you have to pay more tax than the same exact person does in California? That's just not right. It's not fair. It's what I think so many people object to about the tax code, that it's been warped over time by special interests, including by high-tax states, to where it's not fair. The playing field is not level, and that's a big thing that we're trying to fix in this proposal.